Picture this. It's the dead of night in the rolling fields of southern England. A group of shadowy figures move silently through the wheat, crafting massive, flawless geometric patterns under the stars. They call it art. They call it a prank. But what if there's something more? What if the hands that carve these crop circles are guided by forces they can't explain, forces that twist time, summon apparitions in a whisper, and whisper secrets from beyond? We're going to dive into the strangest mystery you've never truly understood with a man who's lived it. He's known only as Citizen D, and he's about to blow your mind. We're stepping into the phenomenon that's captivated the world for over 40 years. Crop circles, those sprawling, intricate designs that materialize overnight in the fields of Wessex and beyond, etched into the earth like cosmic fingerprints. For decades, we've debated their origins. Are they messages from extraterrestrials, portals to other dimensions, elaborate hoaxes? But what if the truth is stranger than any of those? What if the real story begins not with aliens or secret tech, but with people, ordinary humans caught up in something extraordinary? Our guest is a man who knows this world inside out because he's been part of it. He calls himself Citizen D, a former crop circle maker who hung up his tools a decade ago, but never stopped chasing the mystery. In his provocative new Substack and upcoming book, It Can't Be People, Citizen D flips the script. He's interviewed circle makers who speak of eerie compulsions, reality-bending synchronicities, and ghostly encounters in the fields, experiences that suggest they might be more than just artists or pranksters. Could they be conduits for something bigger, something unknown? And he joins us from an undisclosed location, his identity shrouded for reasons you'll soon understand. He's not here to debunk the myth, he's here to deepen it. So buckle up, because we're about to venture into the fray with Citizen D, where the lines between maker and mystery blurs into something truly uncanny. Let's get started. Citizen D, welcome to Strange Planet. How are you?
That's just an amazing intro, Richard. You just saved me about half an hour there. It's just thank you so much for that. You've nailed it, honestly. Fantastic.
You spent years sneaking into fields to create crop circles. Why did you do it initially?
Um, the first 20 years of my experiences were not in the fields. I was going into the fields, but I was seeing them. My background is in the paranormal. I've always had a deep-seated interest in ufology and the paranormal. I don't know where it came from. It's always been within me, since childhood. When I first saw Close Encounters, it touched me on a primordial level. It touched my psyche as if I was remembering something through the collective consciousness rather than seeing something as an 11-year-old for the first time. Being brought up through John Keel and Jacques Vallée and the 70s, the classic authors through the ufology. That was my sort of apprenticeship into it. And then in the 80s, we started to see in the UFO casebooks, we started to see pictures of crop circles, which were literally circular indents in the crop, which looked like birthed flying saucers, or they'd be singular circles with 4 satellite circles around the end that looked like the B movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still, tripods kind of thing. And that's when I became fascinated and thought these look like birthed UFOs. And their precedent was with the Australian tally nests in the 70s, which were done in grass. But over here, because they were done in crop, they were much more pronounced because the crop was like tall, 2 foot tall. Then in 1990, when we saw the first pictograms, which was like the Led Zeppelin cover, which was like the 2 circles and the door keys coming off of it. At that point, really, the connection between birthed UFOs and crop circles should really have been obliterated because no UFO looks like that. But the collective psyche had decided that UFOs were connected to crop circles, so that they turned from birthed UFOs into messages from our space brothers, which was a very clunky thing for me. Anyway, I soon realized that Wiltshire wasn't far from where I lived, so I decided to go and visit crop circles. And I did that for 10, 15 years. I just visited them. There was a resource called Crop Circle Connector. We knew where they were. And this is an important thing here, Richard, because if somebody said on the website, well, there's 10 crop circles here, but 3 are man-made, I go, I'm not bothering to see those then. I can't be bothered. I'm not interested. Okay. And then I became really fascinated with it. I used up a whole year's holiday and spent 8 weeks right in the hub of Crop Circle country. And I made it my mission just to visit every single new event there was. But then I started to hear stories from people that were returning tales of strangeness. And they were Crop Circle makers who I absolutely held in the same disdain as most of your listenership will. I thought the mystery was deep enough. I always use the analogy of the magician with the cups, and the balls under the cups. It's deep enough as it is, and there's some prankster comes up and adds another 10 cups. I held these hoaxers in disdain. I thought they were egotists. I thought they were doing it for a laugh, and I thought they were doing it to pull the wool over people's eyes. I knew that some were doing it as art, but that's a different thing. Okay. But I knew in my mind, I thought these people are just, making fun out of the phenomenon. And then I started to hear more and more tales of people saying that they were being compelled to do this and they didn't know why. And crucially, Richard, it was in this area only that they were getting this compulsion, where we've had stone circles, for the past, dating back thousands of years. There's always been high strangeness here. So I was asked if I wanted to go out with a team, because I've been overheard saying that I didn't care how they got there. I was more concerned about the power that they had once they were there. So we went out. I joined this team. It was a 2-stage event. It was a crop circle that hadn't been finished from the night before. And I went out with this team of about 10 of us. There's always a team leader, and the rest of you were like stompers, depending on what you experienced. Anyway, we did this crop circle, Richard. Nothing happened at all. I thought this whole thing is a crock of rubbish. It's just ego. It's part of the prankster ethic. This has just been a waste of my time, and I felt like I'd wasted, my night. But at the end, when the crop circle was finished, I looked towards the perimeter edge, at the very edge of the crop circle, and at this time it was about 3:15 a.m. at this point, because we've been there since 10 p.m. And I saw a single magnesium flare type light at waist level that looked like somebody had been taking a photograph on a Polaroid camera. And I thought, oh my God, we've been caught. There's been somebody watching us. This is because it's illegal to make crop circles. So
Sure,
this is
you're
my
destroying.
DBS
Yeah, you're destroying farmers' crops.
absolutely. It's criminal damage, and it's trespass. It's not a criminal offence legally, but it's a civil offence. So anyway, I saw this single light, and I said to the team leader, "Oh God, we've been caught." And then I looked at this light a bit closely, and it proliferated into 6 lights, then a dozen lights, and then 30 lights. And these lights sprinkled their way all around the perimeter of the circle, which I describe it in my Substack as a giant necklace. And I said to the team leader, what the hell is that? And he said, it's just them telling us that this circle is finished, not to do anything else to it in case we mess it up. It's a round of applause, and it's telling us to go home. And he looked up to the sky, and I said, who are you talking to, T? And he went, I'm talking to this lot. And he said, he addressed the sky, and he said, okay, we've done our work now. You go and do your work now. And what he means by that is, he used to say to me, the circle is ours for as long as it's being made, but the second we leave it, it's not ours anymore. And then he said to me, don't worry, you're going to get used to this, because I think you'll be doing this now. And that was my first experience. So, and then the second crop cycle I did, I saw a pink light. It just flashed into the sky the second we did our first stomp board. And then when the crop circle was finished, the pink light vanished. And then I was hooked after that.
Well, can you explain how these initially these man-made crop circles. Is it is as simple as just strapping boards on your feet, and someone has a, I don't know, like a schematic or a blueprint, and you just stomp around until you achieve the artist's rendering, or how does it work?
If you can think of it as like a spirograph from when you're a child, when you've got those things with the compasses and the pencils and the rule, it's that scaled up, Richard. It's that scaled up. And if you were to try to do this by yourself without any sort of mentorship, you'd probably mess it up. It's boards, and we've got rope, which is drilled through holes at the end. They're normally 1 meter boards, and then we hold the rope up and we stomp. But it's measured out before it's done. Okay, so when you see shaded in parts like spray painted, it can take up to an hour to measure it up. And it's not just meter boards. We'd actually have half meter boards and square boards for the more fiddly bits that you couldn't actually get for the right angles. We use markers, normally poles. I've seen GPS used, I've seen lasers used, but to be honest, when I saw that done, I really thought it was being done for effect, and I could have by that time probably achieved the circle without those apparatus. But yeah, that's basically how it works. But a good circle is only as good as its architect.
Right. Now, I've seen, many of us have seen some incredibly intricate crop circles. Some have described, fractals or these incredibly complex geometric designs. I mean, how sophisticated were some of these where you were basically strapping boards on your feet? How sophisticated or elaborate were they?
First of all, you're not strapping boards to your feet, okay?
Okay.
It's a stomp. There's no strapping involved.
Okay.
Okay. It's a meter board and you stomp. Okay.
Got it.
But I've been involved as a foot soldier, as like a drone with probably 2 of the best artists that there are, and you wouldn't dare to actually go against any of their instructions, because it's sometimes they say to you, do that bit, and you think it doesn't make sense, and then you realize when you see it as a bigger pit, when you see the bigger picture, you realize how your bit has. And people also say, well, from ground level you can't see what the bigger picture is, but it's just scaled up. What is an inch on the paper is a few yards in the field. So if you take a line out 50 foot and then you do crab steps around, it will be 100-foot circle. And you when you've reached the other end, you'll know, because in the darkness your eyes become accustomed very, very quickly. Once that groove is down, once that crop is flattened, that bit looks darker than the rest. So you'd be amazed. We've got this trope of, you can't do this in the dark. Your eyes become accustomed within 20 minutes, and then you can see the bits that are down because they're darker than the rest. But for the first few circles that I did, I was at the mercy of the architect, so to speak, and I just did exactly what he told me to do.
Crop circle researchers I've talked to over the years say that if you're stomping, you're going to break the crop plant. It's going to snap or it's going to be crushed and so forth. And then you have these other crop circles that are not man-made, where it's almost like it's woven like a carpet, where there's intricate layer upon layer and so forth.
Yeah, but Richard, they're 2 completely different issues.
Right, I understand.
The weaving is. I know what they say. I know what the researchers say. But with respect, I would say this: if you've never, well, my example is this. I know a crop circle artist who's one of the best in the business, and he said to me, "I install boilers for a living. If you can't install a boiler and take it apart, all right, I'm not interested in talking to you." Okay, so I know what the arguments are. Mm-hmm. Okay, but as far as the weaving goes, the weaving is normally done by hand. Okay, and as far as the bent not broken argument,
right,
I would defy you to go into a field with the permission of the farmer and stomp and bend and break every single one of those stalks. Okay. And to give you another example, there was a crop circle made in Yatesbury, and I think 2012, and that was done as a school project which was overseen by one of the best crop circle teams that there ever existed. And it wasn't actually announced as being man-made until about a week after the believers had been in it, and they all came out. They all came out with bent, not broken stalks.
Ah, interesting. All right. So when you're feeling compelled to make these designs, is it like an unseen hand guiding you? I mean, is there a creative urge or something closer to a trance? Describe that feeling.
Well, there's no feeling of a trance, okay? And we're not zombified or anything of that nature. But I've got to go deeper here and
Okay.
say that people say that we're channeled. Okay, I don't believe that. I think that the word channeling is it implies that we're anointed or special or chosen. We're not. Okay, the people that make genuine man-made circles, as opposed from the pranksters and the people doing it for art, we feel just aligned to the phenomena, and we think that the phenomena, once it recognizes that we're aligned to it, okay, then we're in some way mentored, if you like. Now, I'll give you a couple of examples. I made a when I went to do my first crop circle by myself. Dreams and synchronicities are very, very important. And what you think is a mistake maybe isn't a mistake. What you think is a wrong turn down a road isn't a wrong turn. It's supposed to be there. I had a recurring dream whereby I was swooping over two fields that I didn't recognize. And in both fields, there was crop circles, completely different designs. I had this recurring dream for weeks before I went to Wiltshire. And when I got to Wiltshire, I couldn't recognize the landscape in my dream as anybody that I knew. And in my dream, next to me was this little kid that I used to go to school with 30 years before, that I've never thought of for 30 years. No reason to think of him. So I'd wake up thinking, I've had that crop circle dream again. I've got those two designs, and I've got that guy in my dream again. Why is he here? And then I took a wrong turn on a trip to Wiltshire and found myself exactly in the landscape that I'd been seeing in my dream. And I turned to see the road that I was in, and it was the name of the road was the same name of the road that this kid had lived in 30 years before when I knew him. And I thought, that's weird. So I decided to do the crop circle. I didn't have enough of a team to do both, and because you've only got like between 10 and 3 a.m. to get it done. So I showed my team the two designs. They were completely different. I found my partner. We couldn't decide which one to do. So I just said, okay, well, I'll go to one field. I'll sort of Luke Skywalker it. I'll just completely empty my mind and let it flow through me. And whichever stop mark, that's the circle I do. So I got this circle done. And then the next day I got a phone call from my partner in London. And she said to me, God, you were busy last night. I said, yeah, we got one circle done. And she said, no, you didn't. You got them both done. And I said, what are you talking about? And when you look from Google Earth, these two fields were separated by a hill. Okay. But from Google Earth, it just looked like a straight line. Mm-hmm. And my first crop circle from my dream was in one field, and the other crop circle from my dream was in the other field. And we didn't know about that team doing it, and they didn't know about us doing it. And that's when you start to think, is there something else at play? But we don't know whether we are actually communicating through the collective consciousness, and we're sort of telepathically talking to each other through the sheldrake species field of humans with humans, or if there's a triangulation and there's something else which is at play.
Wow. You mentioned the orbs that you've seen in the fields, or these lights.
Yeah.
What else? Tell me about some of the other strange things you've seen in the fields, apparitions, presences.
The big thing is the lights, okay? And what you've got to recognize is that where the crop circles are made, there's a very intense military presence. Now, I'm not sure if that's a coincidence. That we think that the crop circles are actually an extension of what our forebears did with the stone circles and the tumulite, thousands of years ago, because it's Stonehenge and Avebury, all those sacred mystical sites. And I've always said, Richard, it's a very, very odd place. Okay, so people have been seeing fairy lights, and they've been seeing will-o'-the-wisps, what we now call UFOs. They were calling fairy lights. They've been seeing those things for thousands of years. Okay, so not to muddy it, but what I'm telling you is that you can sit on top of Knapp Hill in Alton Barnes, and there could be no crop circles, and you're going to see some crazy stuff. Okay, we see predominantly pink lights. We see very, very rarely do you see the conventional structured craft of UFOs. It's normally lights. Okay, and it's normally at treetop or aircraft height. But I've seen stuff, as I said, at waist level, and people that I know have made crop circles, and they think nothing else. They think nothing strange has happened, and when they leave the field, they look behind them, and there's orbs like in a figure-8 figure, like a scale electric set, as if they're sort of auditing their work and scoping it and looking for errors. It's like a compliance thing, really. It's really, really strange. But what's interesting is that when I interview crop circles, when I interview crop circle makers in Italy, it just seems to be that the high strangeness events occur here within this ancient area. Okay, so I've interviewed people that have seen apparitions, and they've had very strange experiences. But my thing really on this, Richard, it's the synchronicities in the dreams, and it's the things where sometimes we'll make a mistake in a crop circle, and then if you make a mistake, the beauty of what we do is that only we know what it's supposed to be in the first place. So if there's a mistake, if we replicate it, you're none the wiser. And then we find out that mistake is the most important part of the circle, because it's got a strange significance to the date and the area that we place it in. And then we go, are we being played here? Is there something else going on?
Can you give me an example where a mistake actually ended up having a very deep meaning?
Well, this is another thing. Sometimes you'll see a crop circle and it will mean nothing to you. It'll mean nothing to the wider populace, but it will be of relevance to one single person. Okay, and if you look at Carl Jung's findings and teachings, we are one is whole. There was a situation where we made a mistake on a crop circle and we had to turn it into something else, and then the next day a tourist had come from Australia, because people come from all over the world, and she had received in the post a birthday present that very morning, and it was a talisman, and the talisman was exactly the same design as what we put in the field by mistake. And of course, that just absolutely blew her mind and blew ours as well, because we normally go into the crop circles afterwards to see what the reaction is without, because the thing with there's no authorship with these things. Okay, we don't there's no ego. It's the circle speaking. Okay, so people say to us, well, if you're so clever, you'd be screaming it from the rooftops. You don't, because the second that a crop circle is seen to be man-made, the magic is kind of sucked out of it, So we used to love going into the crop circles the morning after, or rather the afternoon when we've had some sleep, because the hours aren't very sociable, and seeing what the reaction is. And that's a big pull to it. It was never about ego for me, Richard, and the crop circles makers that I know who are genuinely compelled to do it. It's never been about ego. That's one of the reasons why I'm not appearing on camera today. And obviously the other reasons are it is damage. Even now I could be prosecuted by a farmer if I tie myself to a circle.
Right.
And it's not. We want the art to speak rather than ourselves. The second that you put humans in an ego capacity, the whole thing the magic goes.
You said that after you leave the circle, after it's finished, it's no longer yours.
Absolutely.
But people have reported going into crop circles having healings or feeling an energy. People talk about equipment that doesn't work inside the crop circles, film cameras or video cameras. Is that
I've
all
had it.
true? You've had that.
Absolutely. All of it's true. Now, certainly with the healing, what I would say to that is that it's not a Jimmy Swaggart, right, where people are chucking their crutches away. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's just normally maybe a bit of maybe some rheumatism or some arthritis in your fingers. It's normally small things, but everything that you've see. When I was a believer, I was a believer for 20 years before I made my first crop circle, and then I'd go into a crop circle. We used to have those batteries, the old cameras with the clunky AA batteries. They
Mm-hmm.
drain, mate. They just go. Okay. Um, our phone signals would actually, you could see them spike. I saw one bloke once walk in and out of a crop. He was straggling it. He was walking inside the crop circle and then outside the crop circle. And when he was inside, he had no bars on his phone. And when he was outside, they were all there. All of this stuff is real. Okay. So I've gone into crop circles and found that. And then I found out later that was a man-made circle because I've recognized the style, because a lot of crop circles, it's like Banksy, they've got their own tags. Okay, so you can look at a crop circle and think, well, that's T. I know who did that because his speciality is crescents and feathering and spikes. So when I was a true believer, everything that you described happened. But it's happened actually when we've been making circles, dead phones have come to life and things like that. So everything that you're talking about is true. But people say, well, it can't be man-made because those things happened, or it can't be man-made because something magical happened. What I'm trying to say to you in this interview is this is not a black and white phenomenon, my friend. There is something else going on. And the second that you accept and you put humans into the equation, it's a lot more interesting than birth flying saucers. It actually becomes a consciousness thing, and it actually blows the mystery up to 1,000 times the size that you think it is. And that's not to say that we make all of the crop circles. What I'm saying to you is, don't give us a hard time. There's something very, very deep going on here, okay? And there are still circles that we can't account for. But I'm more interested in the single circles that we still see, the old styles, because I've seen the crop bent up, at a foot on those things, and that's not possible to be done by a board. But it's not a black and white phenomenon, my friend. There's something else going on, in our opinion.
How about time distortions
Um,
for you?
Again, you can have that as an observer. Okay, and I'll give you an example. When I went into my first crop circle in Avebury in the late 90s, I thought I was only there for 10 minutes. Okay. And you get a profound feeling. I had a very profound feeling in that crop circle where I thought, this thing shouldn't be here. But at the same time, it looks completely tranquil and it looks completely at home in this environment. It's a magical environment. And I had this very profound feeling of, I've actually seen this before. It's like the answer was just beyond my grasp. And it's like the answer is something that our ancestors had when they were more attuned, and we've obviously not got it anymore. So I had this profound feeling of, this all makes sense, but I can't quite grasp why. And I looked at my watch and like 2 hours had passed. Now that's a common thing. But I had an instance once where we went to the field. It was an inexperienced team. We went out really before we should have done it by ourselves. We'd all been mentored, and this idiot had actually got the tape the wrong way round, and we were measuring out in meters rather than feet. Okay, and then halfway through we thought, this is 3 times bigger than it should be, and then we thought, we've got to try and finish it. We were racing against time. There was no way we get it finished. It was like sort of 2 a.m. by the time we realized how bad the problem was. We had like an hour and a half of sunlight of our shroud of nighttime left. And we just said, oh, what we wouldn't give for more time. And then we did like another hour's worth of work, which shouldn't have been possible. And then we did another hour's worth of work, which shouldn't have been possible. And I said to one of the guys, what time is it? He said, oh, it's 3 o'clock. I said, that's impossible. It's impossible. And the testament to that being true is we got the bloody thing finished, and it was impossible for that amount of people to have done it in that amount of time. And what was strange there, Richard, was when dawn did break, it was a flash. You know, it wasn't like it was like it had been held back by a dam. You know, and it didn't happen until we stepped out of that field. So that's something that I've had personally that I can't explain. But when it's happening, you don't think it's weird. That's the strangest thing about it. And then you look back on a circle. Sometimes you look back and get delayed reaction on a circle and go, "My God, what was that? What happened there 2 weeks ago?" You know, you don't process it until afterwards. I know people that have actually seen shadowy figures. I know of one example where it was a team of 5, Richard, and this guy looked up and he said, "Let's just see where everybody is. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold on, that's 6. Who's the other guy?" You know, and then you keep trying to see this extra figure, and they sort of flit around, and that's just the stuff that I go, God, what is happening? What is happening in the fields? We just don't understand it.
Do you think the land itself is alive? You know, Stonehenge ever
It's
buried?
it it's exactly. I'm really passionate about it. I moved from London to this area. I was drawn here. Now, the first time I actually came to crop circle country, I had this absolutely profound feeling of not I just thought I'm back. I've never been there before. I thought I'm back. Um, and it is a magical, it's a magical place. People talk about earth spirits and they talk about Gaia. I think that there is something, it could be consciousness here.
Hmm.
And I do think that there is something inherent in the land. And as I said, I just think that we are sort of reinforcing what our forebears did with the stone circles, but we're doing it without the heavy lifting. And when I do interview crop circle makers from outside of the area, the high strangeness and the synchronicity reports and the dreams and like the ring, none of it happens. It dissipates the further you get away. And they're good artists, Richard. I speak to Italian artists. They're really, really good. And I say, look, I'm doing this Substack. It's probably going to be a book. Tell me your stories. I haven't got any.
Hmm. Wow. So who do you think is pulling the strings here? I mean, you mentioned these lights. Who is behind the lights and the
Well,
urge to do
I
these?
well, certainly with the urge, I think that if you're aligned to the phenomenon and you have an interest, you attract it in the same way as like if you're really into UFOs, you're more likely to see UFO. And it's not because it's misid'd or misappropriated it's just you're attuned to it, you're more likely to see it. But what's important to realize here is that the locals have been reporting these lights and all the strange activity for generations. Whether the crop circles have been here or not, they've always been reporting these these UAPs. They used to say, "Oh, it's away with the fairies." Now we say abducted by greys. And if you read Jacques Vallée and he talks about cultural tracking, what my belief is that there is something very, very close to us coexisting alongside us. I don't think, and I'm sorry if you disagree, I don't think the ET solution is the solution for ufology. I think it's something which is coexisting with us. And I think it's very interesting that we had that first Kenneth Arnold, Mount Rainier
Mhm.
sighting 2 years after Hiroshima, and then we start to see flying saucers. When you consider that Kenneth Arnold didn't see flying saucers, he saw crescent-shaped crafts,
Yeah.
and he said they moved as a saucer would when you skip over. Then we started to see flying saucers, and I think that this thing manifests itself in how we expect to see it. Okay. So I think it thinks it's manifesting itself as UFOs. Okay. But if you're really ingrained in the subject, you look at the area and you go, there's something in this place. And it's something which our forebears knew about and we've forgotten all about it. So in answer to your question, I don't think it's CT. I don't think it's external from the planet. I think it's something which has coexisted with us from eternity from our inception. And I think it's an ancient phenomena rather than a new phenomena, if that answers your question.
It does. It does. I don't think we're too far off in terms of our theories here. What do you think they intend for these crop circles? Do they intend for them to be some sort of a message? Why do they want them?
I'm really, as part of my ufology research, which I've done since I was a child, one of the most telling quotes that I ever heard was from J. Allen Hynek, who says, to paraphrase, even if we had the answer right in front of us, we are just not in a position in our evolution to understand it. So it's not my place to pontificate and say this is why it's being done. We don't know why it's being done, and I'm not going to make up some harebrained excuse. Okay, all I can tell you is this is happening. We have mistakes that are engineered, we think. I knew of a tourist that came over once, and he was about to go back to Canada, and his wife said to him, "What would you like as a present before we go home tomorrow?" And he said, "I would love a crop circle in our back garden." Okay. The crop circle was there the next morning, but the bit that fries my brain is that the team had actually planned out that circle 4 days before. So that's where we think there's a time anomaly there, and then you get into the theory of relativity and superstring theory, because you're saying there's a time distortion there. And the design that was placed in the field was pretty much what he asked for, and yet he asked for it after it had been implanted, if you want to take that view. Because sometimes you make a crop circle and you think, oh, somebody's stolen that design from me. That must be the other team. And then you realize that you'll go to a field and the crop circle that you wanted to make is already there because somebody's done it the night before or a few hours before. So the answer is we don't know, but something's going on.
Have you ever gone back to a circle you made and felt like it had changed, maybe, or taken on a life of its own?
Oh God, that's an amazing question. Oh yeah, absolutely. There's two instances. I think I Substack this. Two personal incidents where I was part of a team, and I think it was about my fifth one or something. I wasn't very experienced, and this is going to sound strange, but in the sunshine, there's no gothic element. It's a beautiful summer's day in Wiltshire, and you think it's sunny. Nothing bad can happen to me today. Nothing gothic or dark can happen. And I walked into this circle, and I sort of thought to myself, I wonder what is really behind this once you take the pawns out of it, once you take the humors out. What is really behind this? And I invoked it and said, what are you really? Okay. And the further I walked into that crop circle, I had this terrible feeling of menace, and it was a very malevolent feeling. And it was like, how dare you even ask? In the same way as when you get abductees, asking the greys, how dare you? And I walked further in. It was a terrible feeling. And at one point, I thought I'd been hit across the head. It was like a terrible feeling. And then I came out and it dissipated. And then I thought, you're being an idiot. Just go in again. And it got worse and worse and worse and worse. And there was another instance where we went to a crop circle and it did feel different. And we looked behind us. We thought somebody was following us. We thought somebody was behind us. There was like this crunch, crunch, crunch of the wheat behind us. And I said to my friend, I said, can you hear somebody behind us? And she said, well, yeah. I said, there's nobody else here. I said, the circle just feels odd. And then we kept on walking, and then we stopped suddenly, and then this crunch, crunch, crunch just stopped. It's like a bad private detective. It didn't quite stop in time after we stopped walking. And then we saw a shadow go over us across the crop, and it was just like this 9-foot figure. And of course, we looked behind, and there was nothing there. And I just said, "This circle doesn't feel the same as it did last time I was here. Let's just get the fuck out of here." So yeah, that there were two examples where you do feel that something's changed. Yeah.
Does the act of creating a crop circle fundamentally change who you are? Like, does it rewire your perception of reality?
I think so. I mean, literally, from a literal point of view, I've had instances where I've gone and I'm flagging because I've not had much sleep. Sometimes I've been out twice that week. I've done 2 crop circles, and my sleep hasn't caught up. And you're flagging, and you think, I'm not going to get this done, and your eyes are heavy, and then you get a compulsion just to walk to a certain part that's been completed, and then the once there was a flash of light, and then I just felt this energy come through the crop and tingle through my body, and then I was completely wide awake again. So from a literal point of view, that's happened, but yeah, from a spiritual point of view, I do look back at that time now and think this has made me question more than ever that that there's definitely something else going on. So before that, when you're in the literature, you think, well, this could be, biased literature. But when it happens to you, and it happens again and again and again, and I only made about 25, but I had strange experiences in probably 40 to 50% of those crop circles. And you walk out you walk out of the subject and you think, okay, now I know there's something going on. So it does change you. It does change you spiritually, and it does change your perception. Yeah.
Why did you stop ultimately making crop circles?
It's just a mundane reason, Richard. The hours in my job changed. I was working nights, and then I went into a job that was working days. And also, this is an illegal activity, and the job that I'm in now is not conducive at all to anything, even approaching naughtiness. That's the only reason I stopped doing it.
Did it leave a
I
hole?
still like to go. I still like to visit them.
Did it leave a hole for you not being able to go out there and make them?
Um, what's interesting is that I left the subject alone, and I've just been pulled back now through this Substack. And I was going to do this Substack in 2018, but bad luck befell me when I tried to do it, and I thought it was connected, and then I stopped doing it, and the bad luck stopped. I think in 2018 it was the circles was very prolific still. There was lots of them, whereas now last season was the worst season on record. I think we had 6, and 3 of those weren't even worth looking at. So I feel as if, because like the phenomenon has like died down, it's not a bad time for me to do it now. I feel like I'm getting the same experiences and synchronicities and dreams in writing this Substack than I was getting in the fields,
Hmm.
which is very hard to explain. You think you're out, and it's like Godfather 3. It just pulls you back in.
Some people may be listening and say, well, the talking about the illegality of circle making.
Yeah.
So how do you reconcile the illegality of circle making with the almost spiritual nature of what you experienced?
That's really funny because there was a guy that we used to go out with, and we used to make fun of him because he was not police but not far off. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and we just said to him, look, if the mob upstairs, decide that you're going to do it, they don't care at all what your job is downstairs. So we know we know it's illegal, but you go into a crop circle and you go, on this plane, we know this is wrong, but on the other plane, we know we should definitely be here. Okay. And then tomorrow there'll be a circle, and it's gonna bring joy to people, or there'll be a significance to it that we don't know now. Because we'll make a crop circle and we don't know the importance of it until it reaches the wider world, and then we find out that it's got significance to that area or that date or some group of people that have visited it.
Was it a difficult decision for you to decide to sort of not go public, but to start, because you're anonymous, but to start writing about it
Yeah,
and
it was, but again, I felt compelled to do it. And one of the reasons I felt compelled to do it is because there is so much mythology, and which you touched on before, the bent not broken. It's just, I live here. So I can go and visit every crop circle that's going to land this year. I don't need to get on a plane from America and come over. We experienced this here. Okay, so yes, it was very hard, but I just looked at the mythology. I was looking at some of the things that are being saying by like the people that sort of are seen to own the subject, and we're saying we're the only ones that haven't given our story. And when you put us in, trust us, there is something going on which is much more fascinating with human beings in it than without. And it's if the phenomenon needs us as its pawns because it can't actually do that complex stuff itself. I think it's very interesting that the first crop circles were single circles and they've developed and got bigger and bigger and better and better. Are you seriously trying to tell me that aliens are getting better and better and better and better? Of course not. It's the humans getting better and better and better at doing it. And that is the one thing that the researchers cannot reconcile. They cannot get past that part of it, when we say people are involved.
What kind of blowback are you getting from crop circle researchers?
Awful. I've been accused of being a CIA disinformation agent. I've been accused of being a fantasist. I've been accused of like, pumping my ego, even though my argument is, well, you can't see me. So yeah, it's bad. But at the same time, I'm getting, that's from within the community. So that's 10%. 90% of the feedback I'm getting is from people that are outside the community saying, oh my God, I had no idea that this mystery, that this is the real mystery. So 10% blowback is from, the majority of the community, whereas 90% of it is from people outside saying, oh my God, there's something going in. I think I will get a wheelchair this year and see a crop circle. So it's not enough to, my missus is very, very grounded. She doesn't believe in any of it. Okay. And she's my anchor. And she says, don't worry. If you feel you want to talk about it, you can talk about it and you can stop whenever you like, because I don't make any money out of it, Richard. I'm, the Substack's free to do. When I do the book, I'm expecting to get a proliferation of 1-star reviews from people that don't want to, hear the non-UFO aspect. I'm still to it. But this isn't my whole life, and I've got a very, very rewarding job in another industry. So I'll live with it. But if it gets too much, I'll probably stop. But at the meantime, I do feel as if I'm being aided, as if it's the right thing to do. And it's the school teacher thing. If I turn 10 people around, I've done my job. The
Substack is It Can't Be People. How do we find the Substack?
It's just substack.itcan'tbepeople. And the reason I called it Can't Be People is that first crop circle I walked into, I just looked around and went, it can't be people. And then I realized it was a play on words, because what I realize now is that it can't be people. Yeah, but it is. But there is something else going on which can't be people. So it's like a multi-layered thing. So it's substack.itcan'tbepeople.com.
And the upcoming book, do we have an ETA on that?
No, not at all, because I'm collating stories. And this is another thing, you see. A lot of the stories are the same. So I'll interview circle makers and they'll give me a story and I'll say, well, I've already got something like that mirrors that. So it will be finished when it's finished. So I've got no ETA, and that's not an axe I've got to grind. It could take 5 years. I don't know. I'm not going to put it out until it's absolutely bang on. And I'm still open to getting stories from circle makers, but obviously they need to be vouched for, or people that I know. So I haven't got an ETA. For the meantime, just subscribe free to the Substack, and I normally put an article posted once a week or twice a week with a new account.
Citizen D, great to meet you. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you so much, Richard. I really appreciate being given the opportunity to speak. Thank you so much.
A new Richard Syrett's Strange Planet drops every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.